Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I am here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David, how you doing today?
Good. It's a good day out there. Unlike you, as the trade deadline was going on, and you took first dibs on the story on Kulak trade. I went out for my exercise then. You're still waiting to get out, so it's always a good day when you can get outside and do some exercises, is what I say.
Yeah, yeah. Ken Holland rewarded me by putting off his 3 p.m. presser until 4 p.m. So I guess I'll be going out after that now. Oh, well. There's enough time in there between that and the start of the game that I even have time for a bite to eat if Kenny doesn't go on for too long.
Hopefully, it'll be interesting to see how he describes Brassard's game. So the Oilers made a couple trades, Bruce. They traded for Kulak. It's not Stu Kulak. What's his first name?
Brett Kulak.
Brett Kulak. Stu Kulak was a player in the 80s, right? Played for the Canucks from the Edmonton area as well.
Yes.
And Brett Kulak, I wonder if they're related. Anyway, he's a defenseman from Montreal. The Oilers traded a second-round draft pick, William Lagesson, and there may be some salary retained. I don't know if that's confirmed yet. And they also traded a fourth-round pick for Derick Brassard of the Philadelphia Flyers. This is Derick Brassard's 10th NHL team. Bruce, we'll just straight ahead. What's your take on the first trade, on the Kulak trade? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it?
Stu Kulak, I was right. He played for the Oilers briefly in 1986-87 and was traded as part of the Reijo Ruotsalainen deal. So Brett Kulak is from these parts. Some sources say he's from Stony Plain, some from Edmonton. He played minor hockey in St. Albert, which is relevant in the sense that at the end of the year when his contract expires as a local fellow coming home to play, he may be somewhat more inclined to sign with the team. But for now, the deal is for what he can bring for the rest of the 21-22 campaign. And what he brings is some stuff the Oilers need, like you look at their back end, and they've been running with all these young left shot defensemen, but they've kind of been faltering in this last little while. Chris Russell came on the last two games, and I thought he played pretty good. But I still think an experienced left shot D-man on the third pairing that has the potential even to play up the lineup a little bit is not a bad ad. He's it's right out of the Ken Holland playbook. On the trade deadline, the first thing you do is you go out and get a veteran defenseman. Then you look around and see what else is there. And it's 3 out of 3 years that he's done that in Edmonton, his first trade. This guy, as veterans go, he's a young veteran, a mere 28 years of age and only 316 NHL games on his resume. But, he's been around the block. He's played in parts of the last 8 seasons in the NHL. And this year he played, bumped up the lineup a little bit in Montreal just because of the injuries. They didn't have, of course, Shea Weber all year. They didn't have Joel Edmondson for all but 4 games that he played. And so Kulak's been kind of on the cusp between a 4 and a 5 in Montreal, playing about 17 minutes a night at even strength. His most common partner is Jeff Petrie, which says top 4 for sure on that team. But he has moved up and down. He's mostly an even strength player. He's from my recollection of watching the guy, a pretty good skater and mover of the puck, and doesn't mind jumping into the play a little bit. And he's right out of the Holland playbook, like I said, to bring a little bit more depth on the back end.
So the first time they did it, Mike Green, that didn't work out. Second time, Dimitri Kulikov. The price was pretty low for Kulikov, a 4th-round pick. Yeah. Bruce, the first thought that went through my head when this happened was kind of a knee-jerk reaction, like, what the hell? A second-round pick for Kulak? He's the third-pairing defenseman, essentially. Kulikov was a second-pairing defenseman, and they got a they're kind of similar players, maybe in some ways. I don't know. Like I haven't watched Kulak's game, so I can't say I can't speak to his value as a player. I just don't know. Maybe, and he played in 13 Stanley Cup playoff games last spring. That's to his credit. That's if you're a terrible player and you're playing in 13 playoff games, that's going to have a detrimental impact on your team. They're just not going to use you, or they're not going to succeed. Montreal had some success last year with Kulak in the lineup, so that there's something there. But again, I haven't put in the hours and hours that I believe personally that it takes to fairly rate an NHL player. So I'm not going to speak to his value. I'm just noting that he, Edmondson and Weber went out. That's the reason he's seen as a second pairing defenseman this year in Montreal, is that there was some major injuries and he got bumped up the lineup. He's kind of like, fourth, fifth defenseman now. So he may be, I didn't know what to think of Cody Ceci. And Cody Ceci has turned out to be the Oilers' best defenseman, I think, so far this year. I think. That's my argument. Their best defenseman. And maybe Kulak will similarly surprise me and impress. And the other thing I like about this, Bruce, is the Oilers, I think they did need some more veteran depth in case of injury during the playoffs. We have seen Niemelainen, Lagesson, Russell, and Broberry in that third pairing role, and Slater Cuckoo this year. And it's been a little bit, I've really liked what I've seen from Broberry now and then, but other than that, and I've liked Russell in the last two games. And I think Chris Russell shouldn't be counted out, and he's going to compete with Kulak for playing time, just like he did with Kulikov. But it didn't work out great with these other players. And you never know when Keith is going to get hurt. You never know when Nurse is going to get hurt. They've both been hurt this year. You never know when any defenseman is going to get hurt. So I like the fact they're bringing in another player. I just I'm honestly really skeptical of the price they paid. And a second round draft pick, it's not, when you look at Brad McPherson's chart of draft pick value, a second round draft pick doesn't have major value in the big scheme of things on average in general, but every now and then it really does, right? Every now and then it's not Mitch Moroz and David Musil. Every now and then it's Ryan McLeod. And you can get something there that you're not going to get a little later in the draft. So in terms of the value, if the first overall pick in the draft, Bruce, has a value of 100 on average every year, that's how he rates his system, so you can comprehend what the value of the other picks are rated.
Right. Okay.
If you draft 20th overall, that value is 14 compared to 100. So it's 14. It's quite a bit less than 100.
On seventh.
A third, if you're drafting in the middle of the second round, which is where this pick for Kulak is likely to be, that's a third of that 20th overall pick's value. Its value is 4.5 or 4.4. Right. So the first overall pick again is valued at 100. This pick, the second round pick, doesn't seem a lot from first round pick to second round pick, but it's actually, in terms of its value, it's dramatically less valuable than the first overall pick. It's dramatically less valuable than a late first round pick, is the truth as well. So it's not, these picks in some ways can be overrated. But every time you have one of these picks, it's a chance. It also works out to one more opportunity to get a really good player. And I don't know if that's factored into, when you average it out, when you do an average of it, if that's factored in that you can actually get Duncan Keith or Shea Weber in the second round. That happens, right?
It did happen.
Now the fourth round pick for Derick Brassard, on the other hand, is a value of 1 point something. But again, the Oilers have taken Matt V. Petrov and Carter Savoy, I believe, in the fourth round in recent years. Or if Petrov was not taken later than that.
Petrov went in the sixth round, and Savoy did go in the fourth.
So
Savoy went in the fourth, yeah.
So sometimes, and we don't know if these players will turn out. They may not, but they're trending very well. And so is Tyler Tullio, right? Like he was taken in the fourth round, I believe.
Fifth round, yeah.
Fifth round. So I'm kind of, I wish it had been a lower price that they paid for Kulak, and I note, so it's hard to compare to other teams because every trade is intricate. They're often involving other pieces. But you know, a second round pick. I guess the best direct comparison, Bruce, is Jeremy Lazon, who went. Seattle traded him. I'm not sure who they traded, but they got a second back. Was that Boston or say who did they trade him to? Jeremy Lazon was traded from Seattle for a second pick. There were second round picks involved in trades, you know, for Marc-Andre Fleury.
Mm-hmm.
His starts out as a second pick and can go to a first if there's playoff success. Now that would have been worth a second round pick, I think, if you could have persuaded Fleury to come here under those circumstances. Josh Manson went to Colorado from Anaheim for a second round pick, and Drew Hellison, a prospect who was taken in the second round and seems to be holding that second round value, I'll suggest. I mean, just from a look at his stats. So 2 second round picks for Josh Manson. Would you rather, I don't know, I guess I have a better impression of Josh Manson, but again, I haven't watched him that closely this year either. I can't say. Maybe Josh Manson's games dropped enough where he's just that much. He's not much better of a player than Kulak. Like he's just one more second pick better than Kulak in terms of his acquisition cost and his value. Maybe that's fair.
Yeah, injuries the concern with
Josh Manson.
With Manson in recent times. But yeah, it just seemed to me all the prices were fairly high in terms of draft picks, like right throughout this process. That there was surprisingly high. I mean, you could have got Justin Brown, for example, for a third round pick, but he's like 34, 35 years old now. That's frankly, I'm surprised that wasn't the way Holland went, but because that's really his MO, is to make a trade for a 35-year-old defenseman, not on the deadline. But yeah, the Oilers keep paying this price over and over and over again in trades. They're always dealing future draft picks. They're never getting any back. And so they're always dealing from a shortfall. The last time the Oilers had 7 picks in a draft, which has 7 rounds, was 2017. And they've been too short. I think each of the last 3 years they only had 5. Now this year, depending on how the conditional pick goes, and this was a complicated trade for Kulak. It was a second round pick this year, unless the Oilers make the Stanley Cup Finals, in which case they owe the same second round pick to Chicago. It's a condition on the Duncan Keith trade. And if that happens, then it becomes a second round pick in 2023 that they have to owe the Habs. The Oilers also sent William Lagesson to Montreal in this trade, and Montreal, for their part, retained half of the $1.85 million cap hit on Kulak, just so the Oilers could just squeeze him in underneath. So they're paying an extra premium, of course, for that to get Montreal to eat salary. But assuming the Oilers don't make the Stanley Cup Finals, then this year they'll owe their second round pick to Montreal for Kulak, their third round pick to Chicago for Keith, and their fourth round pick to New Jersey for Kulikov. That's last year's trade. And they're constantly dealing at a deficit in terms of they have to trade next year's picks because this year's they already traded away last year. And we've seen this with Holland. I mean, he traded a 2020 and a 2021 second to get Andreas Athanasiou, and a deal that really bit him on the butt. He traded a 2021 fifth to get Tyler Ennis in 2020. Then he dealt a 2022 fourth to get Kulikov in 2021. And now he's dealing into 2023, possibly in the Kulak deal and definitely in the Derick Brassard deal, because he didn't have a fourth this year because he dealt that last year. So now he's dealing next year's fourth. So it looks like the Oilers could go as many as 6, or well, they could go 100 straight years without a full complement of draft picks the way they're going, because they're always dealing from their future draft picks, because they haven't had any success or anywhere near enough success in the past actually using the draft picks to get players that can fill the depth roles for them. They're always trying to fill from outside.
It speaks to this summer signing of Slater Cuckoo, right? They decided to sign him to a 2-year deal. And I liked the signing at the time. I thought Cuckoo had a good year the previous year. but his game kind of fell apart this year. He got injured again, and he's on leave now. I guess he was sent to the HL now. I think he's on a leave. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I hope things are well with him. But he didn't, in terms of his performance for the Oilers this year, it didn't work out. If it had worked out, they wouldn't be making this trade today. He was the guy in this role. And then they tried all these other players. And, to give the Oilers credit, they're a lot closer to having the depth players that are coming close. And you could, one way to look at this trade, Bruce, is they traded William Lagesson today and a second pick for William Lagesson 2 years from now, essentially, in Kulak. You look at their careers, William Lagesson's numbers and his career path is very similar to Kulak's. So we'll see if that's the case, if William Lagesson pans out like that. So it was a failure in the and not finding a better alternate defenseman than Slater Cuckoo this summer. Could they have gone back to Kulikov, for instance? Was that open to them? How much would have that cost? What did he? I think he signed for $2 million a year.
2 years at about $2 million, just over $2 million, I think.
So a little bit quite a bit pricier than Cuckoo. They do have, the depth bubbling up though. Niemelainen is close. He looks close. Broberry's on the team next year. I mean, some people are saying, well, maybe they'll sign Kulak next year, and of course that's a possibility. But really, you've got Keith next year and Nurse next year for sure. Philip Broberry's got to play next year, and I guess he could play on the right side. So if Kulak shines, he could get another contract, kind of take Chris Russell's spot in that 6-7 D-man role. So yeah, and I guess Chris Russell's been hurt so much it's hard to know what they have. I mean, he has played well, but can you count on him being healthy through a playoff series? And you do need more depth. So I understand the need to make a trade for a veteran defenseman. Again, just the price was a little higher. Let's move on, Bruce, to the Brassard trade. What did you think? They traded this 4th-round pick for Derick Brassard. I have to say I like the trade until I saw Mark Spector random. And again, I don't know. Haven't watched Brassard. I can't say what he's like in his, he was obviously a good NHL player before, but he's 34 now. And Mark Spector published some quotes from some scouting service, which talked about Brassard's last 10 games. And essentially what they were saying is he's an offensive-minded hockey player. And his play, when he's attacking and having some success there, he can still be a good player. But his defensive play leaves you wanting. His play off the puck is not great. And it just reminded me, we just got rid of Kyle Turris. We don't need another center who can't cover the slot, the defensive slot. Brad Malone can, by the way. You have Brad Malone. I'm not exactly sure why they needed this player. They just got rid of Turris. He seems like the same player in a lot of ways. Maybe he's a bit better on the tack still than Turris was. But, they have Derek Ryan as a depth center. They got Ryan McLeod. So I'm not sure I get it, but it's not that high a price. So I don't have any hair to lose, but I'm not losing any more of the hair that I don't have.
Well, on the bright side, the Oilers didn't trade Mika Zibanejad and a 2nd-round pick for him the way Ottawa did in 2016, one of the worst trades of the 21st century. So there's that.
They were in on a few, Ottawa was.
Yeah, man, I don't know what they were thinking that day. Anyway, he has played, the Oilers will be his 10th NHL team.
He's wanted, Bruce. He is very wanted.
Yeah, he's a highly desirable commodity, obviously, or else he wears out his welcome quickly. And he's gone from 309 games with Columbus, his first team, to 254 with New York, his second, to 139 with Ottawa, his third, to 54, 20, 10, 66, 53, 31 with his last 6 NHL teams. He didn't last so much as a full season in any one of those places. So I'm not sure what that tells us, other than obviously people want him, and he does things that they like, and maybe when they see him up close and personal, they find out they don't like him all that much, and on he goes to the next.
Well, if centers who don't cover the defensive slot quickly wear out their welcome. That's what I find. And so if that's his game, this is a mistake. You can't have that in the playoffs, and this has been plaguing the Oilers forever. So you can make an argument, Bruce, that the signing of Kyle Turris cost Dave Tippett his job as much as anything. Not filling that key role at third line center was such a key acquisition, and having that gaping hole there last year and somewhat solved this year, but all last year and the start of this year, big problem for Dave Tippett, along with the goaltending, of course. But anyway, Brassard isn't being asked to be the third line center. He's being asked to be a fourth line role player.
Presumably.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, if Nuge is not back, we'll see where Brassard stacks up in the lineup tomorrow night versus Devon Shore and Ryan McLeod. But we'll see. I mean, I read some reports that he's a strong defensive player, in fact, a defense first player, and yet I look at his stats and he's got 200 goals, 519 points over 936 NHL games. That's pretty decent production, and he's even still scoring a half a point a game this year.
Yeah.
Age 34 in Philly, 16 points in 31 games. And not quite sure why he's only played that number of games, but and a plus player in Philly this year, which is no mean feat. Of course, that's always subject to a certain amount of randomness, but he's decent on the face-off dot. He's been over 50% the last few years. 51.3 this year, but at least holds his own on left shot. Centerman, not a big player, not a particularly tough player. He's got 10 penalty minutes this year. 6'1", 202, so I guess average in size. Certainly uber experienced, and now the Oilers have him and Derick Ryan, who also was originally brought in for that position, even as Ryan had switched over to the right side. So more experience, fewer draft choices. It's another deadline day for Ken Holland.
There's lots of examples of Oilers centers brought in who haven't worked out in recent years.
Forever.
Eric Belanger, Ryan Spooner, Boyd Gordon, Kyle Turris, Will Acton, Jared Smithson, Kyle Brodziak, Colin Fraser, David DeHarnay. Maybe DeHarnay worked out if you want to put a lot of weight on that one overtime goal. But one of them who did, Bruce, was Derek Roy, who I thought was good in his short time here. And maybe Brassard will be kind of like that. Now, Roy was used up the lineup because the Oilers were so weak at that time at center. But he had some wheels and he still had some game. Maybe Brassard will be like that. So I'm hoping that, I think that would be the best possible outcome, that he's kind of like a Derek Roy kind of player. And maybe he will be. So again, not having done the work to fully assess this player, I'm going to try not to be too negative, and certainly I'm not going to be too positive, but just kind of, We'll see what happens next. When it wasn't a terrible price, even if this one doesn't pan out, I wish it would be a 5th round pick or a 6th round pick, but there's not a whole lot of difference between a 4th, 5th, and 6th round pick in terms of their value. It's just minimal. So,
yeah. Well, the other one that I would argue was a success in the position was Ryan Strome. Of course, Shirley gave him away for Ryan Spooner in one of the worst Oilers trades of the 21st century.
Yep.
But that was Strome was in the minority of 3 Cs that could actually hold their own on this team. Anyway, as you say, Brassard's probably more expected to be a 4C, or will be once Nuge gets back, unless they decide they've got such depth at center now they can afford to stack Leon and Connor back together. But I don't think we'll be seeing that as an ongoing thing anymore. But I think Woodcroft's got a good handle on that. Put them together in special occasions and have them driving separate lines most of the time.
Bruce, is it fair to say, let's admit, I'm going to admit, I don't know much about these players, but at the same time, it feels, both of these trades at this moment today feel like a bit of an overpay to me in both cases. And it adds with a feeling like we've now had 2 GMs in a row who kind of consistently overpay a little bit on trades. And in Shirelli and Holland, and you can go back further, maybe you'd have to look at that more closely, but it really felt like Shirelli did that constantly. And now it's feeling like Holland does that. So I'm just wondering, is that just BS that every fan base feels like it's critical of its GM and judges its GM too harshly? Or is this in fact a trend in Edmonton? Is this real? And I don't know if you can answer that. I don't have an answer for that because it could be either, but that's how it feels like to me. Does it feel like that to you?
Well, it would feel better if we had a little more track record of trading for a guy who comes in and actually helps. You know, I mean, Athanasiou and Green and Ennis didn't make much difference in 2020. And Kulikov, who I actually like that trade, and I still would defend that trade for a fourth, for a top four D-man, but he wound up getting healthy scratched in the elimination game of the playoffs, so something went sideways. And of course, the Oilers have had very little playoff success uh, uh, to pin to their resume in the last 15 years, really. I mean, David Desharnais scored a big goal in the only series Edmonton has won since 2006, so maybe you can say that trade was a win just for that. But it was, it's there. I mean, you look around the league and you see all these powerhouse teams bringing in like real uh, fine players, the top names on the list who were available going to Florida, Colorado, Tampa Bay, New York Rangers, all the teams up. Did Edmonton improve their team today as much as any of the teams that they're chasing? Not sure that they did. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
Vegas that didn't do anything, sure. But the gulf between where the Oilers are in the standings and where the very top contenders are seems larger than ever to me at this moment.
I guess that's a good point you make. Like, if there was countervailing trades that they clearly won, and Shirley did have that in his back pocket for a while, right? Like, he had the Cam Talbot deal, he had the Maroon trade and the Cassian trade, which looked good and really good initially. So there were some things that you could point to and say, well, he has made some good deals. Like, yeah, maybe this isn't going to work out, but there's been some good deals. He seemed to get worse as things went along. He maybe got a little more desperate. The thing I guess you could say about Holland is, and this is when I took a look at it last night, if you actually look at their forward group, I mean, how long, Bruce, have we been looking and moaning about the need for top six wingers to play with McDavid and Draisaitl? Not an issue anymore. There's a plethora now of players. There's competition on this Oilers roster, real competition for the spots on McDavid and Draisaitl's wings. And they don't need to play them together because they brought in Hyman and Kane. I mean, Evander Kane, I don't know if there's a better player, a better addition at, post in this year, this calendar year, than Evander Kane signing in Edmonton. So that's to Holland's credit. If he's going to get blamed for maybe not being the sharpest in some trades, then he has done well there. Derek Ryan is panning out. Like, he has become, I think, he's met the mark in terms of what I was hoping for, at least. Now that he's moved to the wing, especially, he's a really solid NHL hockey player, and he's getting the job done. Cody Cece's another really strong signing. So there are some countervailing things with Holland, including, and then there's Jesse Puljujarvi, him convincing Puljujarvi to come back, which is crucial for the team, not giving up on that player. So there's that countervails against some of the trade stuff that's gone on, and it is a reason that the Oilers, although not making great trades, they've got a fantastic group of NHL forwards. If you ask me, I really like this group of players. Now the elephant in the room is they didn't get a goalie.
Yeah, they did not get a goalie, and there was not. I mean, Marc-Andre Fleury moved along to Minnesota,
Yeah.
and they moved along their backup goalie, Finnish guy,
Kakkonen.
to
Kakkonen.
to San Jose. And the other goalie of note who moved today was Harri Sateri, the Olympic gold medalist from Finland, who was signed yesterday by Toronto, waived through the NHL in the hopes of activating them onto their roster, who was claimed by Arizona Coyotes in a hostile GM move of the sort we don't expect to see here in Edmonton, but Arizona did it. More power to them as far as I'm concerned. But they claimed him before. Edmonton wouldn't have had the chance to claim him, but I would have been absolutely shocked to my core if Edmonton had pulled off a move like that. It's just not Holland style. Anyways, I'm not sure there's, what's out there that's demonstrably better than, especially the way he's been playing Mikko Koskinen. I mean, people like putting down Koskinen. At the same time, you hear people say, if Edmonton had average goalie, they had good enough to be able to win games. And, Koskinen, if nothing else, is an average goalie at the NHL level.
Well, it's
I think
funny,
it's fair
Bruce,
to
because
say
people,
that.
people were bringing up Jake Allen. Jake Allen's save percentage in the last 5 years are abysmal. They really are. Like, they're below league average. He had one good year, and otherwise it's been like 906, 903, 904, 905, and they had the one good year. And then for a second there, the name John Gibson at Anaheim was mentioned. His save percentage the last 3 years is like 906, 905, 903. Like, you're going to pay $6 million a year for his reputation, his past, what he was before he got hurt. I think he's been hurt. That's got to be the explanation. I mean, Anthony Stolarz is out playing. The guy that no one mentions the great Stolarz giveaway of the Oilers. Stolarz is, for goalies that played more than 10 games in the NHL, he's one of the best goalies for save percentage this year in the league. I think he's like near close to 920. Anyway, nobody saw that. But I agree, Bruce. Koskinen, Fleury's save percentage this year, I think, is 908, and Koskinen's is 906. In the last 15 games, Koskinen, I bet you for sure, has outplayed Marc-Andre Fleury. So there is that. And there is also the faint hope that Mike Smith will get healthy and return to his form of only last year. He was a really good goalie. And then there's also, they're talking about bringing in Kokkonen, whatever his name is. Sorry, Mr. Kokkonen. Kakkonen. But is he any better than Stuart Skinner? I mean, you look at his numbers over time, and he's a young goalie. He's about the same size as Stuart Skinner. His AHL numbers are the same. He's got a bit more NHL experience, but he's done nothing exceptional in the NHL. So I was thinking, the names that I was hearing for goalies today, Kakkonen and Allen, and to some extent Fleury, they weren't thrilling. Right. At least Varlamov has a 913 save percentage this year, but he didn't want to come here apparently. So,
Fleury. I mean, for all that he's, he comes into Minnesota and takes over the number one role from Talbot. If you look at their stats, they're almost indistinguishable. I think Fleury is 908, 295 goals against average, minus 1.2 goals saved above average, and Talbot's 907 with 292 and minus 1.3 goals saved above average. They're almost identical. And you can say, well, Fleury played on a worse defensive team in Chicago, but the goals saved above average kind of a little bit puts the lie to that. And we'll see. Chicago did pretty well there to take Fleury for nothing at the beginning of the year, use him for most of the year, and now trade him off for a second-round pick that could become a first if Fleury delivers in the playoffs. And so they got a good draft choice out of that connection.
Good time to be a seller. Look at the Canadians; they got a real haul, and I think it's mainly because they had that Stanley Cup run. So all of those players, Sherratt, Kulak to some extent, Lakeinen, they have that kind of glow about them, right? Of Stanley Cup playoff success, which increases your value in the NHL. It does. And so that helped the Habs get the bounty of picks that they have gotten at this trade deadline. Well, Bruce, I guess we can leave it there. Ken Holland's going to be on soon. Any final thoughts or other thoughts?
Yeah. Just say they did nothing with Josh Archibald.
Could they trade him to the States though? Could he even cross the border?
He's a dual citizen. So there you go. His dad is from Saskatchewan, and he was born in Saskatchewan. But Jonathan Willis pointed out that he played. Dad played college hockey in North Dakota, and the mom was on the swim team there, and she's obviously an American because Josh is a dual citizen who in fact played for the United States at the World Junior Championship when he was that age. And so he would definitely be able to cross the border. Our friend Murdoch Davis had raised some question about that because if, a foreign national unvaccinated would definitely have trouble crossing the border. But that to me, that was an opportunity for the Oilers to get back a draft choice. They're always trading them away. Let's get some draft choices coming back here, that we're not going into the draft with 4 picks and 1 pick in the top 100 like it's going to happen this year. And it always seems to be a one-way street, that our players, depth players, don't have much value on the trade market. I think they could have got something for Archibald and to trade him to an
Bruce,
American team, but
you think? I don't think. You know
I
what?
don't know about top 100. I'll have to say that.
No,
but
it's
they
not
could have
that.
got a pick.
I don't know if he's tradable. I think that his vaccination status may have rendered him untradeable. Because this year, you're thinking, the States, maybe for just as a rental, you could have got something for him just for the rest of the season. Maybe you're right. But if you're thinking about
He's
the
a
player
UFA
long term,
at the end of it.
the vaccination rules may not change for cross-border status. I suspect they won't in terms of being vaccinated. That's going to be that's going to have a lot of traction for sticking around. A lot of countries insist on vaccination before you enter them. I could see it for COVID being the case going forward. So, but you're right. Maybe just as a rental, they could have got something for him this year. That might have happened. But if they're thinking of Josh Archibald in years to cut, like next year, the year after, but fair enough. They were probably just, a team could have got him as a rental. He would be a useful rental player for an American team. As good as Andrew Cogliano, I think, at this point.
Well, tonight he's not available to the Oilers, so they're going to have to alter their lineup. Brad Malone gets in at left wing because Josh Archibald is not able to travel with the team. And you'd wonder at what point you're just better off to move the guy for an asset, and that time was today, and obviously it didn't happen. So it's we'll see. I mean, maybe Archibald will find a way to help the team down the stretch and in the playoffs, but he's going to have to do it on a part-time basis, unfortunately.
Indeed. Bruce, thanks for talking.
Great. Thanks for listening, everybody.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.